Hey, Nicholas.
Hey, how's it going?
Great. So, I think that you have some really interesting stuff to say, and I want to hear more about it. And I thought maybe some other people would too. Um, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you think the greatest lie ever told was?
I think that the greatest lie ever told was the one that taught us to, of our own free will, give the most important gift that we carry in this life away to some significant other. Um, and that's been perpetrated on us by the powers that be, the church and the state, which are deeply connected. And they're deeply connected by a lie that I think is the greatest lie ever told, which is the one in which a person by the name of Judas the Galilean tried to reach all of humanity with a teaching that was not his own, but one that had been successfully obfuscated or occulted by the powers that be up until that point for thousands of years. And he tried to bring it up and make sure that people understood it and stood for it. And it became the most dangerous teaching that Rome and their tax farming matrix ever encountered. And it was the most dangerous teaching that the Church of Isis, the Roman Church of Isis, ever encountered. And so eventually it absorbed it in the Council of Nicaea and inverted its teachings for its own despotic purposes. And so that's what makes it the most dangerous and important lie that we've ever been told, because it's maintaining a standing wave of deception, or a tree of deception that is almost 2,000 years old now. And it's very simple how we got into this problem, and it's because we don't understand that money is the root of all evil, and that we're not supposed to be exchanging our currencies of value with each other that way, because it's a rich man's trick, and it's always used against us in nefarious ways. And a bunch of black people figured this out that were the original Semites, and that became something that needed to be removed from the face of the earth by this Caucasian Phoenician um, Canaanite organization, which ever since the mystery schools of Babylon has been hell bent on keeping this type of information from us, and then asking us to step into covenants of enslavement of our own free will, because they respect our free will enough to where they know they have to, they need it to participate in the deception for it to last, to exist. Sorry.
Wow. Yeah. So basically, what I've kind of gathered from what I've read from you and also just hearing you speak is that you believe that the story of Jesus was kind of either completely created or co-opted from Judas. It was actually Judas who was doing these things that we've been told Jesus did, but Jesus was more convenient for the controllers or whatever to use as an example because he didn't fight back. He was peaceful. He turned the other cheek and those things. So what you're saying is that we've been tricked to kind of
We've been
following what
we've
Jesus did.
we have been tricked, is the simple way to say it. But it would be oversimplifying it to say that Judas was the only genetic component of this suicide cola of personas that led to the literary invention of Jesus Christ. The three main components of, and then I'm going to say one component which is askew from the other three, and that's Paul. But the three components that Paul was using to invent the ideal Christ were key genetic components from the movement, which were James the Just, who even Judas said was the spiritual teacher of the group. Judas never claimed to be that. He was very clear in the Gospel of Thomas that it was James that was the one who was the best example in all of humanity of someone who was nailing it, beating the game. And it was for his sake, quote unquote, that it was for his sake that heaven and earth came into existence. So the game board that we're all participating in to learn lessons The Messiah, the warrior Messiah, Judas the Galilean, Judas the Nazarene, he said that it was for his brother James' sake that heaven and earth came into existence, which means that no one was doing it as good as James was. So he was actually the living example of the word, the living word, if there ever was such a person, according to the crucified Messiah. So if we follow the teachings of James, that's how we get to the Tootsie Roll center of the Messianic teachings, because he's a historical figure that we know existed and we know what his teachings were. It's not weird like Jesus, where you can't pinpoint whether the person actually existed. We know James did. We know he has historicity. No historicity. Nobody questions that on any side of the research table. And so as we get deeper into the scrolls, we find out that James's crucified brother was actually Judas. And we have no historical proof that Jesus existed, but we absolutely have historical proof that Judas, the brother of James, did the first and second temple cleansing and then was crucified. He narrowly escaped crucifixion in the first temple cleansing with his father Matthias, but the crowd chose the father instead of Yeshua bar Abba to be killed in the first temple cleansing, and righteously so. They wanted the son to live. But Rome spins the story to make it look like the Jews chose Barabbas, and nobody knows that. People don't seem to understand, or they've been purposely taught that that story is something other than what it is. But that's the first. That's Judas escaping his first near execution in that story, and later they cover up the first name Yeshua again with Jesus. So we're left with, and not many people know this, but we're left with a story about Bar Abba where his first name is Jesus. So we're told that we're presented two twins on the stage to the public, and the people choose one Jesus over another Jesus, which is preposterous. Anybody can figure that out on superficial glance that story is a hack job. There, of course, it wasn't two Jesuses on the stand being offered to the public, but that's the final edit. And it doesn't take much research to find that out. But if you go back, you find out the original story is actually Matthias and his son Judas being punished for the first temple cleansing. And the Jews didn't do anything stupid or weird or evil there when they picked the son of the father, which is what Bar Abba means. Go ahead.
Wow. Interesting. So in the writings like Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, all those guys, I mean, some of the arguments I've heard for the historicity of Christ is that all of these guys talked about this person. So you think they were talking about Judas, or were those writings just?
Those writings were likely done by Paul and his Greek co-authors like Lucius of Cyrene, who wrote Acts chapter 13, one of the most egregious errors in human consciousness that's ever been put on paper and used nefariously against human sovereignty, is Acts chapter 13. And there's Romans, I think, maybe it might be Romans chapter 13 too, coincidentally, that does the same type of nefarious activity, making people believe in a vicarious elect that's more important than their opinions, and that is put there by God. So, but I think that the evidence supports that the first four gospels were an attempt by the early tax collectors of Rome to overthrow this moneyless movement. And the first attempt to overthrow this movement, this counterintelligence movement, was done by Paul, who was a half brother or cousin, second cousin to Herod Agrippa. He had married into the family, and he had Roman citizenship because of his Herodian family affiliations, and that's why he's saved by the Romans all the time when the Jews are trying to plot against him, to stone him, to cut him, to stab him. He's always saved by Herod's Roman guard, and then released when things calm down. And people don't put together that that's because he's a Roman counterintelligence agent working for the puppet kings, the client kings of Rome, who were the tax collectors. So we're left with a Messiah who's an inverted version of the original one, who is a friend of tax collectors and isn't afraid to participate in monetary exchange. He doesn't have any money on him, but he tells one of his followers to go grab a fishing pole. And when he catches a fish in the ocean and pulls it out, it's going to have a golden medallion or something in it, a golden talisman or something, and then he can use that to pay the taxes. And so it's black magic, and it walks people right into a carnival trick, the world that the matrix that we've squared off for ourselves here on the real estate that we occupy. And it's not the rounded teachings, the well-rounded teachings of the Messiah. And to further make this point, they put a square on our heads when we graduate.
Yeah,
But we're
interesting.
supposed to have a well-rounded education. But we're built by masons to only know certain things.
There's a lot more to that square, right? The black cube and all of that. The Saturn
Right.
worship, right?
It has to do with why they never worshipped in a church. What took over was the Church of Stonemasonry, which inverted the story and says that it built it on the foundation of the rock, Peter. And these are all names of the bishops of the Church of Isis. They were called Peters or Cephases or rocks. And so when the Church of Isis took over, they made the story of Peter. But they tell us who Peter is. Peter didn't even exist. First of all, Peter is a fabrication to cover up the handing off of the baton to James the Just from his brother Judas. So we're told that this person, the successor after the Messiah, is Peter. But the Dead Sea Scrolls are very clear that it's, and other documents that survived the era are very clear that it was James the Just that immediately took the torch from his crucified brother. But we find Peter inserted here. And then in the New Testament, we're told all these weird stories about Peter and the cock crowing 3 times and how he's going to deny the original teacher and how he's, and then there's even a part in the New Testament in the original 4 Gospels where the Messiah, Yeshua, Judas, tells Peter, get behind me, Satan. And
Wow.
people forget that, but the reason that the Church of Stonemasonry is built on the foundation of the obelisk with the rock Peter is because he is Satan. And it is clearly told to us in the Bible. And this is not a contradiction like most people think. Most contradictions in the Bible are actually black magic. They tell you one thing so that you later walk into it of your own free will, knowing that it will curse you. And we see this best applied in Acts chapter 7, which is the stoning of Stephen. And that is a fake name. Stephen means the crowned one. And they're covering up the execution of the most important person in all of Judea, the spiritual Messiah, James the Just. And James is the one who gives that speech in Acts chapter 7. James is the one that they're covering up and obfuscating as Stephen. And every scholar knows this now. Even the people that want to argue against Judas being the Messiah knows that Acts chapter 7 is actually James the Just being stoned by Paul. And so when he's giving this speech, this very important speech is the last one he ever gives. He says clearly that the way that the Jews, the people of Judea, the original Semites of Israel, could completely curse themselves is if they started worshiping the Star of Remphan again. And the Star of Remphan is what was placed on the Israeli flag.
Wow.
So this is not a contradiction. This is black magic being played out purposefully.
Was Rimpan, what was Rimpan, a person or a place, or what was the Star of Rimpan?
R-E-M as in Mary, P-H-A-M as in Mary. Remphan is Saturn. I mean, there's
Okay.
100 different names for the Lord of the Bible and the earth. Remphan is one of them, but that's the physical bull god that rules all of the entire physical realm in our solar system as we know it. So human consciousness, everything that we can perceive on the earth, all of it is a construct that's maintained by a transmission, a broadcast transmission that is emanating from our original sun and the body in the solar system that originally dolloped us out of it, and we became a moon of it, and it incubated our form into a life-creating or a life-giving structure of its own. And anybody that researches the golden age of Saturn will understand that Saturn used to be our sun. And so Baal, the primeval sun god, is worshipped for this reason, because there was no more beautiful angel in the sky. We owed it our lives as we know it on Earth in the physical, and then eventually the planet, as most of these moons that Saturn creates do, if they're successful, and as Titan is, we're watching Titan do this now. Its most Earth-like moon. We left its orbit and we became our own planet, and it was a nightmare when it happened. I mean, a real nightmare. We barely survived it, but we did survive it, and the adepts now still worship it for reasons that are best explained by quantum physicians. So we are inseparable from the influence of the gamma and other electromagnetic and radioactive broadcasting output of Saturn. It is creating our reality, and it is not letting go. Even though we are not in its orbit anymore, it clings to us like a mother that's watching its child being kidnapped. It's screaming at us with an influence that has been measured by NASA, and you can listen to the Song of Saturn. It's very horrific,
Wow.
but it's constant, and it creates our reality, and that's why the people that worship Saturn, Satan, uh, worship it, because it is the father of the earth and humanity. But it is in no way the creator of all things and gods. It's a lower demiurge that is the master of our game board here. But once we've graduated from our physical incarnation, it becomes obvious to us that it was just the asshole that owned the gym that we were resistance training in, and that the Bible worships the Lord of the seventh day, which is the guy that owns that gym that we train in.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, totally. Sunday is Saturday.
Saturday is
Saturday is right.
Saturn's day.
Mm-hmm. Wow, so fascinating. Oh my goodness.
It's right in front of us, but hypnotism is a hell of a thing. My wife is a hypnotic regressionist that takes people back to past lives and their spiritual life between lives. And I read about all this stuff before I met her, and it's very consistent. Anybody that's hypnotized into the theta state of their consciousness starts emanating this information that is otherworldly, and it's very consistent. 90% of what would come out of your mouth would be completely in line with what came out of my mouth, would be in line with what came out of all of the subjects that Dr. Michael Newton has put together in his 50-year body of work researching the life between lives, our spiritual world between earthly incarnations. And they've mapped this thing out with the scientific method I mean, I can't knock it. I would have knocked it if I hadn't met somebody that does it professionally. But watching them do this, people in real life in front of me are doing the same things that the people in his book are doing. They're evoking this knowledge, even if they have no prior knowledge of it. So anybody, no matter what their background is, no matter how religious they are, if they are hypnotized into the theta state of consciousness, they start talking about the reality of our situation and what happens when we die. And the fact that that's being ignored is evidence that we are under the spell of something else, consciously under some other form of hypnosis that has been mastered by, I believe, the church and the state.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, it's all too convenient. I mean, we've been slaves for 2,000 years now. Yeah. Wow.
I
All
can
right.
really bore you if you don't keep me on track.
It's not boring to me. It's so interesting. Is there anything else that you want to talk about today? That was good stuff.
No, I mean, I'm sure there's. I could wear you guys out with this, but
yeah, maybe little doses because it's a lot to digest. That's a lot of information.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I think the one thing that I wasn't able to get across in Sam Tripoli's interview that I would like to get across in yours in the last couple minutes is When trying to investigate how this conscious hypnosis that we're all stuck in works, I find that there's two variables that are very important, and one of them is something called a flash rate, which flash rate a wave pattern that happens through our two-dimensional screens that's been patented. That's one way that this hypnotic anchoring is maintained, and anybody can look up those patents online. And then the other thing is, I think these flash rates and wave patterns and this knowledge of frequency uh, is being used in coordination with intracellular parasites that have been sprayed over US populations for 70 years. And they are undetectable by the Western blot test. You have to pay out of pocket to even scratch the surface of some of these undetectable rickettsias that they're putting into our gut bacteria. And so part of the meat eating in our culture, it involves maintaining this colony of parasites in our bodies that maintains our cognitive dissonance. Mm-hmm. So if you've ever noticed when you try to reach people that really respect you with information that challenges their status quo and they start to glaze over and they can't receive it, a lot of that has to do with gut bacteria and fungal weapons that have been used against the human species for decades now. Candida, if you do a little research on that, the white stuff that grows on the back of people's tongues, that's you could feed it with Cheetos and high sugar diets. Though that's not an accident. Those things are by design, and they lead to psychosis in the long run, and maybe even dementia and syphilis. So there's a lot that has to do with we're suffering for a lot of diseases that cannibals have suffered for thousands of years, and this is well known. And the state benefits heavily from people that are suffering from cannibalism. And so this is another part of the teaching that the Messiah was trying to teach, that if you go vegan, you start eliminating the need that all of the needs that you think you need the state for. And
this was both Judas and James.
The whole Essene community was already vegan before Judas founded the fourth philosophy. So that was just a further taking that to the next level. But veganism was key to this culture that did not need a government, and they did not need or want money. So a lot of things start becoming clear once we stop living on the same tissues that we're made of. But that brain fog that's created when you do eat animal-based tissues in the long run creates the necessity for vicarious representation, vicarious salvation, and babysitters. So that teaching that eliminated that sickness in people, that psychosis in people, became very dangerous to the government. And this isn't the first time that happened. It was just the most profound time that it happened, and they had to reset all of history to a new 0 point to eliminate or genocide these Black people that figured out that money was the root of all evil. But all they were doing was repeating a teaching that Pythagoras had taught 2,500 years earlier, and that the government at that time had also destroyed for the same reasons, because it was self-empowering, and they want centralized government.
Yeah, definitely. So are you saying that the Essenes were Black?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, the original Semites, and when I first started looking up the definition of Semite, the Webster's dictionary was still telling the truth. All Semites are African, Arabic, or both. There is no allowance for a Caucasian Semitic person. No matter how many times they've mixed with other cultures of their own free will, you would not end up with the Ashkenazi and Khazarian outcome if you were starting with the people that Rome was genociding 2,000 years ago. What we have is a psychological operation that was manifested on a group of people that had no identity after their governments were defeated by Rome after the Ottoman Wars. And so Rome spent the first 6 centuries trying to destroy the Black people that figured out how to beat the game. And then they spent the 7th century and beyond giving those that Semitic identity over to a Caucasian culture that they had almost destroyed, but then gave them an option to stay alive if the Ashkenazis and Khazarians decided to pick one of the Abrahamic religions. And they didn't want to pick Muslimism. They didn't want to pick Christianity. They wanted something that matched the Kabbalah, the Kabbalion, the Kabbalistic teachings that they were used to. And so it was a no-brainer that they could fill the void that was created with the genocide of the Judaic people by becoming the new Jew. And so that seemed like a pretty honest proposal that the Catholic Church was giving these people in the 7th century. But we see now what they've done with it. They created the Thule Society, the Vril Society, that then created the Nazis to create the justification for the state of Israel. And then they gave these people their own nation, which is an abomination according to the Old Testament and the Torah. They're not allowed to ever have their own nation. That would be a curse that would be ongoing if they tried. And not only that, but then they put the Star of Remphan on the flag, which, I mean, talk about walking off a black magic plank of your own free will. They did that. And so now these people that have assumed a false identity have also walked into a black magic covenant with the people that authored the Old Testament and New Testament for our consumption. That is the state of Israel. And now look who's being blamed by Kanye West and Mel Gibson as the origin of our suffering, as the focal target of our righteous disdain against the banking system and taxes and all of it. They're pointing to the Jews, which is a psychological operation created by the oldest terrorist organization on the planet, the Church of Christ. And that's why Kanye always props Jesus Christ when he's slamming on the false identity we know today as the Jews. So it's very deep, a very deep, multi-layered deception. But if you really want to keep it simple, then you should read the book, The Journey of Souls by Michael Newton. Because when we wake up from this horrific dream that's being maintained by this trilateral matrix of this death cult, this black cube Saturn worshiping death cult, when we wake up from this bad dream, the place that we came from is a beautiful, beautiful place. And all we have to do is remember that place and remember what our purpose here is. And we also get our power back. And so the book is The Journey of Souls by Michael Newton. And then for those that are technically gifted, the next level in that understanding is the second book, The Destiny of Souls, where he answers a lot of the very detailed questions only people like me ask.
Well, that's a really good place to stop, I would say.
Yeah.
So that
all right. Thanks for listening.
Remember that book. Awesome, man. Well, that is just so much fun. I love this stuff. I really appreciate you sharing all of your knowledge with us. You have done a lot of research, and it's so fun listening to you talk.
Thanks. Anytime.
Yeah, we'll do this again. Thanks, Nick.
It was good to meet you.
You too. Bye.
Bye.